Let's get to our guy, Sean Deveney. He's an NBA insider for Heavy.com. Sean, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, 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 good. I'm listen. My partner's accusing me of heckling him over a foregone conclusion tonight. Um, you've seen stranger things happen in situations like this, haven't you? How much of this do you think will be about OKC's maturity in the moment versus what Indiana does or doesn't do?
Yeah, I think and I think you're right. And obviously the Tyrese Halliburton situation is a big thing, but I think that this series and really this whole postseason, looking back on it, has been about Oklahoma City and its development, its ability to handle these situations. They went through pretty much the same thing against Denver in the conference finals as what they're going through now with Indiana, where they lost the first game in a stunning fashion. They come back, they win the second game, and then they managed to win a game four on the road that they probably shouldn't have won. And to me, the game four against Denver and then the game four against Indiana, that's the real test of Oklahoma City and what they can become. If they lose either one of those games, then all of a sudden, they're down 3-1 and everything looks much dicier. But they've won both of those games, and I think to me that really set things into motion. So yeah, I think you can go back to Game 4 and say, that's where Oklahoma City won this series. That's where they won this championship, just like they did in the Western Conference against Denver.
Sean, I made this argument in real time that game four for Oklahoma City was important because not just obviously going down 3-1's a disaster, but it seemed to shatter the mystique of the Pacers in real time. Sometimes you see these boxers that are undefeated and you're not really sure how they're doing it, and then they take a loss.
Roy Jones.
Roy Jones, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of, actually. They take a loss, and then they take several after that in pretty short succession because this aura around them is shattered. I really felt like that proved true in Game 5, where Indiana's down 18. They get it all the way down to 2, but unlike seemingly every other time in the playoffs, they weren't able to get over that hump and get the win. Did you get that sense as the series was playing out that Oklahoma City finally shattered that kind of boogeyman close game aura that the Indiana Pacers had through most of
Yeah,
the playoffs?
yeah. I mean, I think that was sort of I think it was a situation where Oklahoma had to prove something to itself, but it had to prove something about Indiana, and that is that this has been quite a ride for the Pacers. It's been remarkable to watch, but there's a limit on it, and I think that's what we've seen. I mean, this isn't a team that's gotten accustomed really in the last few months. They haven't gotten accustomed to losing two in a row. So yeah, it is kind of like you guys brought up boxers. I'd bring up Ivan Drago from from the Rocky movies when Rocky made him bleed.
Yeah.
All of a sudden that
You
changed
see,
everything.
he's not a machine.
Yeah, that's right. He's not a machine. There you go. And so yeah, to see that, and I think it did. Obviously, in addition to the Halliburton injury, but I think it did sort of the confidence that the Pacers have taken to these late game situations. I think it cracked it a little bit.
So when you're taking a look at Oklahoma City and how the roster's constructed, you always kind of look at who's under contract. And listen, the NBA has tried to do their best to punish you for hoarding good players that you yourself drafted, which seems kind of backwards, but I get it. That's their answer to parity. But given how they're built and how far Presti's come in terms of some dark days and moving on from KD and Harden, and it's well documented with how Sam Presti's done this thing. Can you see them being built for the long haul?
Yeah, I mean, they've got themselves set up. But what's interesting about the Thunder, and a point that probably isn't brought up enough, is what the Thunder did is exactly what the Philadelphia 76ers tried to do with the process. And the thing that happened with the process is the Sixers were so loud about it and so upfront about it, and they talked about it, and there were stories written about it, and that really angered the NBA.
Yeah.
And so the NBA, Colangelo'd them, put Brian Colangelo in charge and ended the whole thing. Whereas the Thunder just sort of did it quietly and methodically, but they did the same thing. There's really not much difference between what the Sixers were trying to do and what the Thunder actually did. So now you're in a situation where, you're getting the fruits of all this. So it's a perfectly built situation. It's not replicable. That's probably the best thing for the Thunder, is that there's not like a whole bunch of other teams that are going to be able to do this. Not with the new rules, not with the restrictions on trades.
But Boston was the closest, and you can't do it post what they did to put that roster together.
That's right, and the Celtics were at the point where they already had to start paying guys, and so they paid them, and now you see them, they're trying to get out of all those things that they paid, and the Thunder are still probably 2 years away, not next summer, but I think by the summer of 2027 is when a lot of these bills are going to come due, and they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do. But they've got the magic of draft picks. They've got this whole trove of draft picks, and everybody says, well, what are they going to do with all these draft picks? Well, they're going to draft new players and let some of these guys go, either by trade. When it comes time to pay Lou Dort a lot of money, they're going to trade Lou Dort. And, they know they can't have all the things. So, if they trade Lou Dort, then they hope to draft his replacement, a guy like Cason Wallace, for instance. And, they're going to keep doing things that way. And they're pretty well set up for the near future, certainly for the next 5 years, to where, they'll be able to keep this core together and just keep replacing the parts around it.
Let me ask you something, and maybe NIL factors in this as we kind of transition a little to college, the draft. With guys like, London from Michigan going back, and I think Pettiford and Condon and Boogie, a lot of good college players came back. And then you pit it against looking at this year's draft, and who knows what's going on with Ace Bailey and why he isn't where he should be. But when you look at this draft, are you in wait and see mode, or are you as kind of curious about 3 through 15 or 16 as everybody else is?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think when you get to 3, things really do open up. I think the questions about Ace Bailey are probably fair. And
what do you think's going on there?
Well, I mean, it's a little like the Shedeur Sanders situation, right? Where I think he's just turned off a lot of teams in terms of his approach. And, I think that it's not an apples to apples comparison. Obviously, the NBA is a different game. It's not a 53-man roster. It's you've got 5 guys who are going to play. So if one of them is really good, you want to be able to get him on your team. But you also need to look at everybody's got talent at this point, and who are the ones that are going to work and push and show what they need to show to get the most out of that talent. I think there's some teams that are worried that they don't see that as Ace Bailey's priority, and so that's kind of what's happened there. Look, he's good enough that no matter what, I don't think he gets past Washington. Certainly, he's not going to fall out of the top 10, as we've seen with some guys in the past. But right now, that's kind of the view of him. So yeah, I think it's really going to start at 3. It's going to be wide open there. Some indications that the Sixers are at least listening to offers, or that maybe they wanted to move up to number 2. But I think the Sixers wind up keeping that pick, and we'll see which direction they go. They're going to have some options for sure.
So let me ask you this: outside of Flagg and Harper, who are everybody's 1 and 2 in that order, no questions asked, if you had to bet on someone else being the best prospect in this draft, that is, one of those guys you see, obviously the Giannis's are the outliers, right? But you see it every once in a while where a guy that goes later ends up being the best player in the draft. If you had to bet on one of those, who's the guy that intrigues you?
One thing that's really interested me is that Derek Queen came in as a potential top 5 pick, and he has really fallen. He doesn't have the size, and there's a lot of a lot of the measurables aren't where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, doesn't quite ring out as 6'10", 250, huh?
No, exactly right. And but
Better
you know,
than Ace Bailey's 6'7".
but I mean, right, and he's not going to be a center at the next level. But look, the NBA has gone more and more positionless, and so I'm not that worried about that. He's got the wingspan, so he makes up for that. And he's a guy who produced. At some point you've got to look at what happened on the floor and say this is a guy that produced. So no matter what the position is. I just think that he's a guy who is going to go later in the lottery, but is going to be, to me, has as good a chance to be an all-star as anybody after those first two guys. Anybody in this draft. So I think whoever gets him is going to get a guy with a lot of upside, considering where you're going to wind up drafting.
I don't know why, but I thought for sure you were going to say Kasparas Giannakis.
I'm kind of enamored with him a little bit.
I'm like, that is a total Sean Deveney answer right there. Because he is interesting. Let me ask you about, you see what's happening with the value and the going rate, the cost for doing business. People raise their eyebrows over the Desmond Bane haul.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy gets a lot of comps to Desmond Bane. Does Con Knipple, is he intriguing to you or at all? Because when we were going through March Madness and Duke's run, and we talked about, well, how does he do it? He's ambidextrous, yeah. He's not explosive. He plays angles.
Pretty thick.
He's a thick guy, like kind of below the rim guy. Almost everybody has him in the top 5. Does that surprise you in terms of how he ended up and where he may get drafted?
Yeah, it does. He does not have the measurables. He does not have. I think his wingspan was 6'6", and you start thinking of how he's going to defend guys, and it becomes pretty obvious that he's going to be a liability. And yet, you watch the tape and you watch what he did, and he was no doubt a very positive player on a really great team. So he's when you talk to scouts, he is as divisive as anyone. You've got guys that don't think that he's certainly don't think he's a top 10 pick. Some folks will say he's a fringe lottery pick. That he's not really a guy who you can kind of count on. But with his shooting ability, when you can shoot the way he does, you're going to get a look. And it's that secondary playmaking. That's what teams who like him look at him as a guy who can be sort of a second point guard out there, and can be a guy who can run the point when your point guard's sitting. So he is he's definitely divisive. I think there's no question about that. But there's definitely some real question marks about the measurables on him and what that's going to mean.
If you're Liam McNeely, would you have stayed?
Yeah, probably. I mean, you mentioned NIL, and that's such a big thing now. It's not like you go back to school and you're broke. You're sitting in the lunch line, right? Yeah, you can still make yourself some money now. He probably he's still a first round pick, and if you're going to get a chance to be a first round pick, probably if he goes in the 20s, it'll be a first round pick on a pretty good team. The way the league is now, sometimes those guys in the 26, 27 range, you could get chewed up and tossed out by the NBA pretty quick. The way things are now, where you've really got to get the most out of your first round draft picks, just financially, just because they are cheap labor. He's going to get more of an opportunity. So I can understand why he wanted to stay. If you're going to be a first round pick, it's tough to pass on that. But at the same time, I thought he could have improved his stock, no question.
Sean, last one for me here. I am fascinated with some of the potential trades this offseason in the NBA. Who in your mind is more likely to get traded, Giannis or Jaylen Brown?
I would say Giannis. The Celtics really don't want to trade Jaylen Brown, and they don't have a lot of incentive to do so. It would really take a giant package to get them to move him. certainly at 26 years old, you're more willing to give up a package for him. Actually a little older than that. I think he's 27, 28, but still sort of at the early stages of his prime years. So yeah, I think there's more incentive for teams to give up more for him than a 30-year-old Giannis. But I think the Bucks have much more motivation. If Giannis says to the Bucks, I want to be traded, the Bucks are going to have deal after deal ready for him right away. I mean, it's in the best interest of the Bucks to trade Giannis, right now, just to start over. They've got nothing on the books that can help them. They've got no other ways to bring in, players who can help Giannis. There's just nothing there. Damian Lillard is hurt, and really nobody wants him at this point anyways. And, the Kyle Kuzma trade was a disaster. They've got no draft picks. So I think there's just so much incentive there to make a Giannis trade. There's much less to make a Jaylen Brown trade. Now they both could get dealt. That would not be a huge shock, but it would be more of a surprise if Brown goes.
This may be too easy of a question, but I guess it depends on what you'd have to give up. Would you rather be a guy that brings in Kevin Durant or James Harden?
Definitely, and you're right. It does depend on what the cost is. But give me Kevin Durant any day. Look, James Harden.
Multiple first rounders for KD now.
No, and nobody's going to give them that. That's the thing is they're asking for that, and maybe if it's two and you're a good team and you're expecting that your picks are going to be in the low 20s, which you go back to the Desmond Bain thing. That's the logic that the Magic were using on that one was, look, these picks aren't going to be high picks anyways. Right now, if you're giving up what you are figuring are going to be low picks, if you're Minnesota or somebody like that, then I think you do it. I think that's where you've got to go. Even at his age, even at 37, and with the health issues that he's had, he's still worth it. He's still a guy who's going to raise the level of your team. I don't want to build my team around him, but if I've got Anthony Edwards there, then I feel much better about it.
That's our guy, Sean Deveney, NBA insider for Heavy.com. Sean, do we close it out tonight? OKC?
I think so. Even if Halliburton was healthy, I would still think that the Thunder are ready to kind of become that team that knows how to close one out, that knows how to step on the neck when it's time. And I think it's time for them to do that. I think Oklahoma City has this thing in the bag.
Sean, appreciate your time. As always, enjoy the finals or off season or draft or whatever comes next. We'll talk to you soon.
All of it.
Thanks, Sean.
All right. Thanks, guys.